It is nearly a year since a fire erupted in the early hours of the morning at a building in Marshalltown, Johannesburg, where 76 people died and many more have been left homeless and now some in temporary accommodation and shelters. Many of the children affected by the fire have been out of school since then, with 20 children not yet having returned to school as they have not found placements. Cost of Living Crisis Campaign Coordinator Mametlwe Sebei joins us to speak on this. Mametlwe, good evening. Thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it. Perhaps let's start here. Why is it that a year later, quite literally a year later, 20 learners have not been able to find school placements?
Yes, perhaps just to start with a correction, we've built what we call the Marshalltown Fire Justice Campaign. It is the one that has been on this matter since the tragedy happened at Usindiso building. Now, there are a number of reasons that we've had thus far. I mean, from the victims that we interact with. One is that there's lack of documentation both of the parents, but also of the young children themselves in terms of the IDs, because when the tragedy happened, Home Affairs did set up a mobile facility for the people to apply for IDs. They were given temporary IDs, but those upon expiry were never translated into a permanent IDs, because of the bureaucratic incompetence and whatever disorganization that is happening there. Then there's another set of documents that pertain to the reports from the previous schools that these kids have. Remember, they were located from the inner city to the outskirts of the city, so they didn't need schools. And for you to change schools, you do need documents from your old schools that shows the grades you are in, things like that, and so on. So those documents, were lost in a fire, and they were never replaced. And I think the efforts to get the assistance from Department of Education haven't been very fruitful. The third other issue is that in areas like Denver settlement, where lots of the survivors are located, there's just simply no nearby schools. And remember that these are people who already were extremely poor, even before the tragedy itself. That poverty and catastrophic living conditions were worsened by the tragedy. But also, since their location at Denver, it had just been a disaster after disaster, particularly in relation to floodings and other disasters that meant almost every third month, these people have to rebuild their lives from the beginning. And the idea that then they will find money for transport to a distant schools and others in that particular area is just not realistic.
Yeah, you mentioned there that the Department of Education has proven not to be very helpful. Do you mind expanding on that?
Well, I mean, we made a point as a Marshalltown Fire Justice Campaign that one, obviously, they've got to be helped with regard to documents from the previous schools. This is what the report I received when we met with the kids, and some of their parents during the meeting we had in the beginning of this year, where they were saying that they are not getting reports from their old schools, things like that. And we said the department must come to the party. We did interviews on that time. We called on the department. There's not been any help. Secondly, we made a point that if these kids were to go to the old schools, that is in the inner city, they are going to require special transport from where they are located in Denver, which is on the outskirts of Johannesburg, or if they are going to find new schools in the area, still those schools are not within the walking distance, and that area is extremely dangerous, and they are again going to require a transport that can make sure that they have a safe commute, from Denver settlement and where they stay. But there are also other, so-called temporary settlements where there are similar problems across the whole of Johannesburg.
Has the city of Johannesburg or the Gauteng province not thought it might be wise to just provide them with transport, because that seems to be the administrative problem here?
Well, the city of Johannesburg has been despicable in the way that they are treating these people. But I think, as I've already explained about Department of Education, Department of Home Affairs, it's the same attitude you find with the city of Johannesburg. The reality is, there has been dehumanization that has happened here, where the rights of these people could be flagrantly violated with impunity, even after the tragedy even after the Usindiso or Commission on the Usindiso tragedy found that the city was responsible for these people. It failed these people, in the circumstances that led to the tragedy and, of course, aggravated the tragedy of the fire. The reality is that the entire elite, the political establishment at many levels of government have come to a conclusion that these are not people deserving of the services, these are not people deserving of the rights, these are not people who are deserving of the dignity that entitles them to the help that shows the level of sensitivity, but agency and seriousness of government that want to address the plight of people who have been through a tragedy like the one that they've survived at Usindiso Fire.
Did the Gampepe report make any direct and explicit pointed recommendations with regards to the placement or the well-being of the children that were being impacted here in relation to education?
Not really. Remember, the Gampepe Commission has now entered the second phase. Now, the first phase simply related to the circumstances within Usindiso building. It is the situation regarding the conditions in Usindiso and many similar buildings, approximately 224 in the inner city of Johannesburg alone, that are in the same situation. That is going to be the subject of the second phase, which has actually started. It's not a matter of the future. It is ongoing now. Now, part of the issues, obviously, is conditions of housing in these particular facilities, as well as, I think, the issue of services, which I'm not so sure that they are directly going to be touched upon, but services in terms of water, in terms of electricity, in terms of rubbish collection, all of that were in the first phase, and the commission made a damning findings about it. But I think the general state of the housing in the inner city of Johannesburg is the focus of the second phase. And I think the issues around services like access to education, access to healthcare and other things, those unfortunately I don't see in the terms of reference being directly dealt with. And I think that is unfortunate, because that is going to mean basically the city is not going to be held accountable in terms of how do we make Johannesburg habitable and hospitable to all the working class and poor people who are desperate to find themselves in these horrific conditions.
Mametlwe, thank you so much for your time. Really do appreciate it. Mametlwe Sebei, who is with the Marshalltown Fire Justice Campaign.